Hello and welcome. My name is Goulden. I have spoken on the My POV website a few times now. I am a retired police officer from Scotland. The last 10 years of my career, I was a chief inspector working with the Violence Reduction Unit, spending a lot of my time looking at the prevention of violence, not just for the short term, but for the long term. And suicide has been a big focus of my the last part of my career, and as I've entered retirement for a number of reasons, which we'll probably go into through this conversation. I'm joined today by a colleague, Toni White, who runs the website For Our Men, and you know, it's very clear from her website that she just wants to get people talking about the subject, which is often quite taboo. Looking at men and mental health, looking at quite a taboo subject. You know, I love on her website, she talks about, you know, For Our Men as a community space dedicated to educating and discussing men's mental and emotional health without the bullshit. I just love that. It's clear. I mean, get talking about it. And today is a chance for us to really start to talk about a very important issue with somebody who has got a breadth of experience, who's passionate about supporting society, men in society, but overall society. If we get this right for men, society will flourish as well. So good morning, Toni, and just welcome to this conversation. Can you start off by just telling us a bit about your background, what you do in relation to this work, and why did you get involved in this work?
Thank you, Graham. It's good to be in conversation with you, talking about my favourite topic. I became involved with men's mental health actually when I lived in Australia for a couple of years between 2013 and 2015. I became friends with a couple of guys that ran their own mental health initiative off Bondi Beach, and through listening to them and turning up, I became really fascinated by the culture in Australia, which is still very, very male dominated. They have a very high suicide rate, high rates of domestic violence, high rates of alcoholism, which is just a perfect storm. And so I really started to self-study, self-research, and started listening to men and asking them why they were struggling. But it wasn't really until I came back from Australia and I started working in a law firm, which is a male-dominated sector, that I really started to recognise that many of the issues that I was coming across were negatively amplified in the workplace, because there's, you know, the status hierarchy and trying to get promotions and what have you. There was just not an open discussion about mental health, and yet I became the unofficial mental health first aider for the office, and ended up mentoring a lot of men. And it wasn't really until I connected with police as a victim of crime in summer of 2018 that officers then just started talking to me about their own mental health. That they saw that I was a men's mental health specialist. A lot of them just felt like they weren't being heard, that they didn't have space for a voice in the service or the organisation as a whole. And so I really just started listening to and supporting them. But it's funny that you asked what I do, because it really does depend. A lot of leaders will say, what do you do? What exactly is your role? And the answer that I always say, which they all hate, is I mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. Sometimes it's a friend, sometimes it's a mentor, sometimes I consult with services that need help in speaking to colleagues. It really does depend, and it's a wide range of issues, you know, everything from middle-aged men with low self-esteem and body issues, you know, right the way through to alcoholism and, you know, facing suicide. So it's there, it's a real issue, and it's not going anywhere.
Thanks for that. And you know, I've only got to know you in the last, I think we've been Twitter friends for many months now, but we spoke in the last couple of weeks. And you know, I asked that question, what you do, and for me, it's your passion. You know, your passion comes across on the social media side of things, but it's coming across now, and you're passionate about a really, really important subject that, for me, is relevant to everybody, not just in a professional role, but it's relevant to me as a dad, it's relevant to me as a husband, it's relevant to me as a friend, it's relevant to all of us. And I often say that everybody in society, we need to take a lot of these issues more personally than we do, because we often think, oh, that'll happen to somebody else. You know, I've talked on this platform before about my experience of suicide. I lost my dad in 2008 to suicide, and it's only in the last few years by speaking to people like Toni and other individuals, and by me listening, that I've started to understand more about what was going on in that situation. And you highlighted that need for you to listen to people who are experiencing it and going through. And I encourage everybody to be listening and talking, but listening to people on this subject. Let's just start looking at some of the, and thanks for that introduction. Let's start looking at some of the issues we face we face in society. In a pinned tweet on your profile, you say you're reaching out to men in all workplace settings to talk about their experiences of mental health. What are the issues that we face around men in mental health in the workplace, but society in general?
I think there's still a lot of myths. We're having great conversations, and I certainly think in the last couple of years, we've seen huge, viral campaigns about men's mental health. And, we've had the launch of CALM, which is Campaign Against Living Miserably, which is a charity and helpline for men. So we have seen this huge surge of discussion around men's mental health and mental health in general. But there's still a lot of myths that are carried through from that. So there's still that kind of connotation, and we see it all in campaigns and celebrities saying that men need to talk. My argument to that is there's no point in them talking if we don't know how to listen and respond. And also, men do talk. They really do, but they talk in very specific ways and to specific people. And it isn't the fact that they don't know how to talk. It's just the fact that we're not listening to them. So it could be something really, really simple, such as body language, or just retreating, or it could be that the fact that they're making mistakes at work. And there's lots of little clues if you know how to listen to them. And I think certainly when we go into sectors that are male dominated, there is this, well, men are the majority, so if you don't speak up, then everything's fine. And there's no need to specifically talk about men's mental health in male dominated work sectors, but actually it's more important, because that's when all the culture of masculinity and the barriers of speaking up and that you have to remain strong actually gets solidified, not broken down, which makes it harder for men to speak up. And so there is a sense that you need to pop this balloon, and I find it all the time that the second I say about my experience of mental health and mental illness, that they see it as disarming, and then as soon as that one person starts talking, then it's like dominoes, which is why I lead my life by lived experience leadership. So the reason why so many talk to me, so many men, is because I say, yeah, I completely get that. Which is why when I talk about workplaces, I always advocate that somebody leading your well-being has lived experience, that gets it. Because if you don't have someone that understands the issues, and then a man comes to them and says, I'm really struggling, and they say, oh, well, everybody's got it tough. You really risk not only the fact that they'll never seek help from a professional, or they won't speak to colleagues or friends, but you might well risk their life if they're already struggling to the point that they're considering suicide.
Yeah, I think you raise so many issues there. That power of one person. In my work around bystander work, I talk about the power of one person. Who stands up and either reaches out or even just talks about a situation. You can create that ripple effect. What you promote, you permit, mm-hmm. And we need that. In many different settings. In the workplace, we need that from our leadership. These are leadership issues. To some other context, you talk about 13.5 men a day in the UK take their own lives. 13.5 men a day in the UK. Just think about that for a second. 13.5 men take their life every single day in the UK. I think men are 3 times more likely to take their own lives than women, and we shouldn't exclude people who anybody who dies by suicide. It's horrific, but we can't sometimes ignore where the risks are, and that's what we're doing here. We're going into the risk. I think the most at risk group for men is 45 to 49.
Yeah.
So this isn't, in Scotland we saw a big increase amongst young people, 50% increase in suicides amongst I think it's 15 to 24 year olds, and we're seeing some spikes at that age group. But when we look at men, I'm 52. I'm in the group. I'm there thereabouts. And I think you're right. We often we often say to, men need to talk. I'm a man.
Yeah.
We find it hard to talk. I need to, as a man, I need to create space for other men to talk. And what you're doing, Toni, as a person who's passionate, and that comes across, is you're creating space for men to talk. One person steps up, other people follow. I think that is so important. Just to really ask one more question at this stage. You talked about we're getting better. How are we getting better at talking about suicide? I think we are. What's your thoughts on that? Are we getting better at talking about men and suicide?
I think we are, yes. That there is, as you said, a lot of people are now aware that 75% of suicides are all men. And it becomes, society often likes to pit men versus women against each other in the discussion. And as you say, actually, women are, I think it's 3 times more likely to attempt suicide than men. So suicide attempts disproportionately affect women. But suicide itself disproportionately affects men inherently because we socialise men to have more violent methods, which unfortunately then lead to a more successful attempt at suicide. So we are getting better. We're getting into men's spaces, whether that's Andy's Man's Club that happens every Monday evening. There's lots of initiatives. You've got Tom that does Lion Barbers Collective, and that's talking about suicide with your barber. So there really is a movement of men's suicide awareness, but a lot of that is still ingrained with myths. So for example, I say, particularly in police, there's lots of, or any blue light work that I do, there's lots of focus on trauma. So they'll say that it's the trauma that affects them, that they have PTSD, and we see that all the time when veterans die. And actually the biggest myth I try and tell people is that men don't need to be mentally ill or traumatized to die by suicide. A lot of the time it's life. So and they will go very, very quickly. So they might struggle for months. I think it was Men's Health did a survey and found that 34% of men spent 2 years in crisis before they sought help. And then the issue being that it's the straw that broke the camel's back. So it could be, a breaking marriage, and then something, so therefore they focus all their efforts and time at work, and then something happens at work, they make a mistake or something happens to them, and they go into a disciplinary, and that's the one safe haven that they had for their mental health has now gone. And then like that, they've gone, that's it. It's within hours, because it's that impulsivity and that, I'm going to control this. The only way I can control it is by taking my own life. That's my decision. Yeah. So actually, whenever I present to police, I always say that it's not trauma, because that wouldn't account. We lose 40 construction workers a month. That 40 a month. That's the highest group totaled the next several groups combined. So actually, when you look at police and military, we say that suicide is a real issue, but actually in vocational sectors such as blue light, military, the perception is, because it's a family unit in a community, that suicide is a far higher risk than it actually is, but you will get far higher rates of mental health crises, and the crises will be longer. So we are getting better at discussing and getting statistics out and getting men, with beer mats, making jokes. And that's a real thing that I use, is humour to talk about mental health, because it's a really serious topic, and it's okay to have a laugh, and you break the ice that way. So we are getting better, but at the same time, I still feel like we are in the awareness phase, and I'm going, consider us aware, now we need action. And that's the next step, I think, is actually helping society and workplaces know how to respond and take action.
And that brings, I think we'll conclude this section this time. And, this first talk with Toni is really just to set the scene for what we're going to talk about. We've started to highlight what's going on in society. We've started to look at the particular impact on men, and that's not as excluding other types of other individuals who are affected by these issues. I think it's important for us to end this part by looking at, because in the next section we're going to start to look at some risk factors, and we're going to start to look at how we can respond. And just to really end some thoughts for people watching this is the power of relationships. I think when we start to meet the next time, we're going to start to talk a lot about what we can all be doing, whether it's line managers, whether it's friends, neighbours, brothers, sisters, whatever. It's sometimes the best responses are the easier responses. It's just about having the courage to reach out, spot something, see a problem, and then move from the inaction to the action. And we'll talk about that in the next session. So thanks for getting involved at this stage.